Welcome back to TarHeelIllustrated.com. And if you're watching on our YouTube channel, Tar Heel Illustrated, I'm THI staff writer Jacob Turner. And joining me for the THI football preview podcast, as he always does, THI publisher Andrew Jones. AJ, we've got another exciting show for you guys today. We've got Deana's Dandies obviously coming up in the next segment. We'll also be talking to North State Journal and Blue Devil Country writer Shawn Krest after that. And we'll also wrap it up at the end, asking AJ about some of his most memorable moments from the Carolina-Duke rivalry over his long, illustrious career. So, AJ, before we dive into it, Carolina coming off a tough loss in Charlottesville to UVA. Now they're switching their focus to the Blue Devils. Noon kickoff in Durham this weekend. It's a big game for Carolina. We've already talked to Matt Brown this week. We've also talked to a couple players, the likes of Phil Longo and Jay Bateman as well. AJ, coming off a tough loss like that, where is Carolina right now? Because it's been a tough couple weeks for them, or a few weeks for them, I should say, when you consider the couple losses they've had against Florida State and last weekend against the Cavaliers.
Well, I think they've been humbled.
Yeah.
And go from number 5 down to the poll in 2 weeks. That could be humbling.
Yeah, that would be very humbling.
But it's not all bad when you look at the big picture. You've got to have growing pains if it's going to be worth it.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing that is long-lasting ever comes easily. And I think what the value of what we've seen in the last few weeks is I believe that Mac is learning more about his staff and his program and everything that's inside the Keenan Football Center this season than he did a year ago.
Mm-hmm.
And that kind of knowledge, that kind of information, he kind of knows, is figuring out exactly what really needs fixing for the next step. Because they have taken the next step from a year ago. But as you take every step you take, it gets harder. It gets harder to maintain because a lot of people could be average or slightly above average, but they're striving to be more than that right now.
Mm-hmm.
So what I find really interesting is the heavy criticism that a lot of fans have of this team right now. Even though they're 4-2, they've been quite prolific on offense. They've done a lot of fantastic things, and they still have a chance to finish out and have a terrific season.
Oh yeah,
but the expectations of this team has skyrocketed from a couple of years ago. The apathy that was once a part of the fan base is gone. Max certainly had a lot to do with that. But last year, the way they competed, the way they closed, the way they started things out this year, maybe being number 5 in the nation was just too much too soon. We kind of talked about that week even.
Mm-hmm.
So where the program is, where the team is that I think they've got a pretty good insulation going on right now where their sole focus is just getting better this week.
Yeah.
They're preparing for a Duke team that can beat them, but they've just got to get better. There's so many things about them that need improving that they don't have time or shouldn't have time to worry about what the outside world is saying.
Mm-hmm.
Just get better in pass protection. Get better at gap control and making your run fits on defense. Be better in special teams. Some of the things the mistakes they're making in special teams, the block punt was because it was a missed assignment. You don't drop a punt in Charlottesville that leads to a touchdown a few plays later. Things like that have got to get fixed and cleaned up. And when they do those things and they trim off some of that fat that's weighing them down, they're going to be a much better football team. And some of these games that they're losing by narrow margins, they're going to win eventually. So that's where they are this week. They're in let's fix what's wrong mode, and while also preparing for a decent football team. And I say decent because Duke does some things well that Carolina struggled with.
Yeah.
So I think that sort of levels the playing field in this matchup a little bit more than what others might see on paper.
For sure, AJ. You looking back over the past few weeks, you look at the Florida State game, tough performance from Carolina, ends up in a loss. Then they bounced back with a big win over State. I think most Carolina fans would agree that was probably their best performance on the season so far. Now they go up to Charlottesville, tough loss against a Cavaliers team that they probably didn't expect to lose to. Now you've got a bounce-back rivalry game against Duke. It's very similar to that Florida State loss in terms of the opponent that they have next being a big rivalry game. How important is it for Carolina this weekend to play well and get the win against a Duke team, especially when you consider how last weekend's game went in Charlottesville?
Well, playing well and winning go hand in hand in this one because there's some games you play where you can play well and not win.
Mm.
This isn't a game where you can play well and not win. If Carolina plays well against Duke, Carolina's going to win.
For sure.
If Carolina loses this football game, there might be some elements of what they do well on Saturday. You can say, hey, boy, they were good here and they were good there, but man, they were bad in these couple areas. That's why they lost. There is no way to decorate a loss as a well-played game. So the mission has to be play well. If they play well, they'll win. If they play well, they won't make the myriad mistakes that they did in Charlottesville. I mean, they were so self-destructive there. They were so self-destructive in the first half in Tallahassee. They cannot be that way. They don't have a great defense. They're not going to be great stopping the run every week. They were against NC State, and that surprised me a little bit. Mm-hmm. They might be that against Duke. I think Duke's got a little bit better ground game than NC State going in. Duke is really married to the run right now, so that's a challenge for Carolina. Like Max said, gap control. Bateman said, got to make the run fits. These aren't my words. These are their words.
Yeah.
So that's the mission. Get better stopping the run, and you can check that off the box going into that game if they execute well on the defensive line. Keep those pass rushers off of Sam. One of the 5 keys going in the Virginia game last week, Jacob, was keep Sam clean. Well, he wasn't. He was dirty at the end of the game. Got hit a ton. Got sacked 5 times. One of them was the fumble that a few plays later led to a UVA touchdown because the sudden change defense has been a big problem. So protect Sam better, stop the run better. And if they do those 2 things, I bet you they win this game, and I bet you they win comfortably. But if they don't do those 2 things, they're going to be in a dogfight.
Mm-hmm. So it's just a case this against Duke of just Carolina comes out to the better team, plays like they're supposed to play, should have no problem beating the Blue Devils. Is that pretty much would you agree with that pretty much?
I think so. In basketball, Dean Smith used to say, well, we just worry about us. And for Bruce Young, I'm not going to do my Dean Smith impersonation. Bruce would get very mad at that. But I think in basketball, you can worry about yourself, and that's fine. Football, there's so much more schematic stuff that's going on. So obviously they're preparing for Duke, but they really are focusing on them. They have to get better. If they got to get better, if they get better, they should beat Duke. If they get better, they should beat Wake next week. And if they get better the next 2 games and then have the open date, then they can position themselves at home to be competitive and perhaps even beat Notre Dame. But you're not going to get to the point where you can beat Notre Dame if they don't get better this week. Stop on the run and protecting Sam. I'm going to repeat this 1,000 times because that's where this game begins and ends, in my opinion.
Absolutely. Going to be interesting to see how Saturday goes down. But that's going to do it for this segment, AJ. Coming up next, we got one of my favorite segments. I know last weekend you mentioned you retired from the game. You retired from the Deana's Dandies intro game, so I'm good. I can take over this one. I appreciate you, Pat. I appreciate you passing the torch to me like you did, AJ. It means a lot. But coming up next, we got one of my favorite segments on our THI football preview podcast, Deana's Dandies. So here's Deana.
It's Carolina versus Duke week. This week on Dandies, I'm just going to focus on a few Duke players that hail from North Carolina. The Blue Devils typically don't have a lot of North Carolina kids on their roster. I believe they have around 15. They recruit nationally, but I'm going to focus on 3 North Carolina natives to focus on the Blue Devils roster. The first one is Jacob Monk. He is the offensive lineman. He starts for the Blue Devils. He's from Wendell Corinth Holders High School. He's the nephew of the late Quincy Monk that was linebacker for the Tar Heels a few years ago and played in the NFL. Monk is a kid to be aware of. Another kid to be aware of is running back Jordan Walters of Fairmont High School down in the southeastern part of the state, I believe in Robeson County. He's a kind of a utility guy for the Blue Devils, a freshman getting some time. And then the third North Carolina kid on the Blue Devils roster I want to talk about got some honors this week from the ACC. Isaiah Fisher-Smith out of Page High School. He's a safety. He blocked a punt, recovered a punt, and he was very instrumental in the Blue Devils' win over Charlotte last week, and he got rewarded for it. An extra dandy this week kind of affects both schools. Anthony Boone, a former Blue Devil quarterback, has been very instrumental in some Tar Heels, and specifically current UNC quarterback Sam Howell and current UNC commit Drake May, 2021 kid from Myers Park. Boone is a quarterback trainer, and he does he's a coach on the 17, the Carolina Stars, based in Charlotte. So I thought that was kind of cool fact. You know, the Blue Devils and the Tar Heels kind of coexisting, but Boone's Carolina Stars have a lot of future Tar Heels on it. As I mentioned, May, wide receiver Gavin Blackwell, defensive back Dontavius Nash, and linebacker Ra Dilworth all played for the Stars this past summer in the 7-on-7 leagues. Thank you, and check back next week.
Fantastic stuff from Deana, as always, during her weekly Deana's Dandies segment. Deana, quick follow-up I want to ask you. You talked about the fact that looking at Duke's roster, you've got, less than 20 guys on there from the state of North Carolina. You go look at Carolina's roster, for instance, they've got over 50 guys from the state of North Carolina. Heck, you can even go look at NC State's roster. They've got 70 plus. So what is it about Duke that, in terms of recruiting in the state, why is it that they're not getting these kids? Is it they're not recruiting some of the top kids in North Carolina and going out of state instead? Or what's the deal with all that? Do you have any idea?
They have recruited some of the top kids, but they go national. You can go look on their roster, and you'll East Coast, up north, out west.
Mm-hmm.
Coach Cutcliffe, he's got a reputation. So I mean, a quarterback, heck, he could probably sign a quarterback from Utah for all we know. With his pedigree of coaching quarterbacks. So. 3 or 4 years ago, Chaz Surratt committed to Duke originally.
Good point.
And then he flipped back to North Carolina. So Duke has had some runs where they've done really well in state, but like Wake Forest, same case. They go to Florida a lot.
Mm-hmm.
So they basically concede North Carolina to Carolina and state.
It's glaring when you look at the rosters.
They have a national brand. Duke football recruiting is similar to Northwestern's and Stanford's.
Mm-hmm.
If you look at their rosters, there are guys from all over. Northwestern's a little bit more regional, but Duke and Stanford have a lot of similarities. Amazing academic institutions. We've talked before about fit and culture, and a kid that chooses to go play football at Wake Forest and has an offer from a North Carolina or a South Carolina, Virginia Tech, he's choosing Wake Forest not just for football reasons. A lot of it is the culture. Every school, and I promise you, every school has a unique culture. Mm-hmm. And Duke has a different culture as well. So Duke is going after kids that fit that culture, kids that will find that culture appealing. Duke isn't going to want to waste a lot of time trying to recruit 4- and 5-star kids that it's generally not going to get, because it doesn't have the football pedigree that most of those kids would be attracted to. But Duke can get a lot of really good 3-stars from all over the place because it has something to sell that a lot of other schools don't have to sell. And because that, it gets into a lot of doors around the country of kids who are high-end academic students and also high-end athletes. So Duke's footprint, Duke's mission on the recruiting trail is a little bit different. And David Cutcliffe, with all of his connections and all of his experiences, I think he's done a really good job finding kids that make it work there, because there was a time, I'm old enough to remember, and that's the line everybody uses, right? I'm old enough to remember when Duke was an absolute train wreck in football. I covered a lot of those teams. I covered Ted Roof. I covered some Carl Frank stuff, and it was miserable. And Ted Roof's a great guy. But, man, that was banging your head against the wall over and over and over. I covered Cutcliffe's introductory press conference. It was one of the best introductory press conferences I've ever covered for any sport. And I walked away thinking, well, if anybody can get it done here, Cutcliffe can. And you know what? He don't judge him by the numbers. Although you can if you take a look at the prior 15 years. He's done a great job there. He's finding kids that work at Duke. He's finding kids that fit. And even at 2-5 right now, Duke is still going to be a competitive team this weekend. And they're going to do it with kids from all over the country because they fit at Duke University.
Exactly. Yeah, I remember even when I was little, Duke was just horrible at football. Like, I remember growing up until Cutcliffe came in. I mean, it was like, Duke sucks at football. Like, that was just what it was. Like, they just never really had good teams. And then you got, like you mentioned, AJ, I completely agree with you in terms of what Cutcliffe's been able to do to a program that, like you mentioned, just was really, really, really struggling for a long time.
Let me throw one quick thing in here.
Yeah,
I
go
know
ahead.
we go on long. Sometimes we talk about the other team, but I used to go to several Duke practices a year when Dead Roof was there, when I was covering everybody, okay?
Mm-hmm.
And I would go there looking for some stories. And I'll never forget talking with Art Chase one time. He's the football SID over there, watching practice. It was one of the most spirited practices I had ever seen, and Duke was 0-8.
Yeah.
And one of the things, and what I ended up writing about was this 0-8 football team just practiced today like they have, a game that could decide a conference championship.
Like they're 8-0 or something like that, yeah.
It was really interesting. I'm just throwing that in there. I'm sure lots of other teams have been like that too. Carolina, I've been to a few of their practices when they were really bad. But it was very spirited, and it really surprised me, and I was impressed by it, and I wrote about it. But I think they finished that year 0-4, and I mean, that may have been the year that Roof got fired too.
Yeah.
But, Deana, I did want to ask you a question about Jacob Monk. His uncle Quincy became almost legendary at UNC with the way he handled his illness that ultimately ended his life. Quincy was a really good player, had a little time in the NFL, and I'll never forget when he went out on the field, maybe as an honorary member for a coin toss or something. This was maybe months before he died. And I've never heard a press box more quiet than it was when he went out there. So when we look at Jacob Monk, a lot of people thought, well, Jacob Monk, he's going to go to Carolina. Carolina didn't really recruit him very hard, did they?
No, unfortunately they didn't. You would think maybe the Carolina, with his uncle being such a great player at UNC, that could have had some effect, maybe possibly looking at him more, but no, they didn't. The previous staff didn't really recruit him and everything. So it's kind of like you said, a lot of diehard Tar Heels wondered why, and that's different staff, different philosophies and everything. So
I think the current staff wouldn't mind having him right now.
No, he's a starter.
Mm-hmm.
He's a really good starter for Duke, so very dependable.
Yeah, definitely, guys. Well, that's going to do it for this segment. Next up, we've got one of our good friends, Shawn Krest from Sports Illustrated's Maven site, Blue Devil Country, and of the North State Journal. So here's our interview with Shawn, guys. Hope you enjoy.
All right, right now, let's go ahead and welcome our very special guest and a very good friend of THI. I've seen him or haven't seen him. You've heard him on our podcast for many years. And you did do a Zoom with us back, I think, when the football schedules came out, Shawn. You and Brett did. But everybody knows him, Shawn Krest from the Blue Devil Country, which is the SI Maven Duke site, also the North State Journal. And you can follow Shawn on Twitter. Very simple, at Shawn Krest. It is a good follow because Shawn works about as hard as anybody I know in the industry. So, Shawn, welcome to the THI Preview Pod.
As always, good to be here. Thank you very much.
Absolutely. So let's dive into it. Carolina Duke, you probably know Duke football better than anybody right now. That is not a part of the program. So I got to ask you, offensively, Carolina's had some issues with offense, other teams' offenses here in the last few weeks. What does Duke do well on offense? And at the same time, what is maybe a concern or two, something that the Blue Devils have struggled with when they have the football?
I think Carolina's catching Duke at a very bad time, offensive-wise. The Blue Devils did struggle on offense in all aspects early in the season. I think the pandemic and the fact that the team couldn't be together in the offseason really hurt because they were bringing in a new play caller. David Cutcliffe was taking over calling the plays and had his own vision of the offense that he wasn't able to implement as quickly as he wanted to just because he didn't have the people there in front of him. And then, of course, Chase Bryce was coming over, had to learn the whole new system. He was hampered for a while because he couldn't do anything officially with Duke until he had graduated from Clemson. And then, of course, the pandemic had hit and he couldn't do anything at all until pretty much August. So he was behind the eight ball. The passing game has sputtered at times. At times it's shown flashes of what I think everyone expected it to be. But really right now Duke is leaning heavily on the run. They've got two strong running backs in Deion Jackson and Mateo Durant. They're bringing out basically David Cutcliffe goes with the one who's hot for the day. He'll try them both, and then whoever does well just doesn't come out for a while. They've had 100-yard games. Both of them have had 100-yard games in the same game twice in the last 3 games. So I think we can look for a steady diet of Duke running the ball against Carolina this weekend, especially because the other benefit is that keeps their defense off the field and Carolina's offense off the field. So I think they'll be looking to do that.
And real quickly, is it the passing game still an issue? Is Chase Bryce? I know he didn't throw a lot the other day against Charlotte, but there was a high interception rate earlier in the year. Has that kind of cooled down some?
He's struggled with turnovers. I think for a while Duke was not only number 1 in the nation in turnovers, but they had twice as many as any other Power 5 team. It was a real problem. And of course they played some teams like Virginia, like NC State, whose defenses were able to take advantage of that and kind of push that number up. They haven't found one real reason for the turnovers. It's been a bunch of little things going wrong. Again, they're blaming that on the fact that this is all new to everyone involved, and so it took them a while to get the hang of it. They had their bye week right before the Charlotte game, and so they think they've got those kinks kind of ironed out. But again, we didn't really get to see a good test of it against Charlotte just because the run game worked so well they didn't have to throw.
Shawn, you talked about the defense a couple minutes ago. What are some things that Duke does well defensively, and on the other end, what are some things they're struggling with this season so far?
The big thing is the pass rush. They have 2 of the better pass rushers in the ACC. They've both been on some mock draft lists in the NFL, in Victor Dimukeje and Chris Rumpf, coming from each of the 2 sides. They've been able to pressure the quarterback effectively in all of their games pretty much, and that's pretty much what the rest of the defense is built on. The rest of the defense is very young. They thought the secondary was going to be a strength, but they lost both starting cornerbacks after the second week, so that's kind of affected them there. But overall, with that pass rush working, the younger players have been able to do well behind them at the linebacker and secondary positions.
We were talking about this before we started recording. There are 3 things that Carolina's really struggling with right now: pass protection, run defense, and in special teams. They've had a couple of punts blocked, and Duke has blocked some punts. What are some of the things that Duke needs to do, maybe in addition to those 3 things, this weekend in order to be able to win the game?
I think they need to. It's going to go back to the oldest cliche in the call-in football shows. They need to be able to run the ball. They need to stay on the field. They need to make sure that Chase Bryce doesn't do anything to hurt them, which has happened at key times during games. When they're running the ball, they're able to execute in the red zone. I think that's another key. When they're passing, they've struggled in the red zone. They've settled for 3s instead of 6s, or they've turned it over inside the goal line, which of course is how they lost last year's game, as they turned it over on the goal line with an interception in the end zone. So I think those are 2 of the keys on offense. On defense, they need to be able to hold up throughout the game. One of the problems, which they think stem from the pandemic, is the defense seems to wear down in the 4th quarter. And then last week against Charlotte, they were on the field for 42 minutes just because the offense was scoring so fast. So I think they're a little concerned about the defense's wind being able to hold up. And then stopping the run. While they can rush the pass well, they have shown a vulnerability to the run, which is something that I think Carolina has the running backs to take advantage of that weakness.
Absolutely. It's interesting that some of each team's strengths play against the other team's weaknesses. So that tells me we might see some fireworks in this game.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely, yeah. I would expect a high-scoring game. I would expect kind of those classic Duke Carolina games of the past where, yeah, we could see both teams heading for the 40s.
Daniel Jones running for 180 yards a couple of years ago, huh?
Yep, exactly.
All right, he's Shawn Krest for Blue Devil Country, the SI Maven site, also the North State Journal. You guys know where to find his stuff. Follow him on Twitter, @Shawn Krest. He does a lot more than just Duke. You can find him really covering everybody in the area. So, Shawn, as always, great stuff. You're one of the best in business, man. I thank you for coming on.
Thanks. Always fun.
Thanks, Shawn.
Yep. Thank you.
Phenomenal stuff from our good friend Shawn Krest of the SI Maven site Blue Devil Country and of the North State Journal. Always good to catch up with Shawn. AJ, a few things that Shawn mentioned that you also mentioned as well. 3 things that Duke does well: rushing the passer, blocking punts, running the ball. Those are 3 things this season that Carolina has struggled with in different cases. Making for an interesting game on Saturday in terms of if Duke can come out and exploit those negatives that Carolina has, had problems with all year. It could be a lot closer to the game than some people expect.
It certainly gives us some things to focus on that could be a challenge for the Tar Heels.
Sure. Mm-hmm.
And from our seat as guys that cover the team, that makes it more interesting. You know, I'm not a huge fan of the game where you just expect someone to, you know, go win 50-0 or anything like that. I don't think anybody in their right mind expects that this weekend. Now, Carolina could win big because the Tar Heels, we've seen them respond. You know, they responded to the FSU performance with a phenomenal performance against an NC State team that's better than Duke.
They were great. Yeah.
And did some things well that kind of went against what Carolina hadn't been doing so well. But Carolina was excellent stopping the run against the Wolfpack, and the Tar Heels are going to need to be excellent stopping the run against Duke this week, because I don't think Duke's going to go into this game thinking Chase Bryce can beat the Tar Heels.
No.
Or really anybody that's of high caliber right now. So Duke's going to have to establish the run to win this game. So Carolina has to stop them from establishing the run to enhance its chances of winning. Carolina can give up a lot of yards to win because the offense is so prolific. But how prolific will it be is if Chris Rumph is in Sam Howell's face all the time. So, you know, we hit on it with Shawn, and we're going to hit on it again. Carolina's got to be able to stop the run, or at least slow it enough, force Chase Bryce to have to pass the ball enough where he can make mistakes and Carolina can capitalize. And the Tar Heels need to give Sam time. Those two edge guys can rush. Duke is 10th in the nation in sacks per game. Only Pitt and Clemson have more accumulative sacks on the season than Duke does. Duke has 26 sacks on the season. So you know, that could disrupt UNC's offense, and not stopping the run could keep the defense on the field for a while. So it's really elemental right there. And then the punt block thing, Carolina shouldn't have any more punts blocked. That was a flare-up in Tallahassee, and they haven't had any other real issues other than that. But you certainly don't want that to pop up this weekend at Duke if you're a Carolina fan, because if Duke's running the ball pretty well, and if Duke is putting pressure on Sam, and then they smack a punt and get a short field, that's how you lose games.
Exactly.
So the Tar Heels can't allow those three things to affect them. If they are successful at that, they'll win the game. Because I do think if Sam has time, he's going to pick apart the secondary. Duke has issues in the secondary, a little bit like Virginia did last week. Sam had a career game. Deana had a career game. So he has and that was with a good pass rush. But Duke's pass rush is better than UVA's. So if they can give Sam enough time to get to the progressions, to get the ball to Deana, get Daz going, they're not going to have Corrales this weekend. So, you know, maybe Antoine Green, maybe Emery Simmons. Emery Simmons has caught quite a few balls, but nothing going downfield. So
yeah, he's been solid.
It's real simple. It comes down to those three things, in my opinion.
Yeah. I mean, I think I totally agree with you. I think it's a case of, and I think Duke fans would even agree with this too, that, you know, Carolina's a better football team. If Carolina comes out and does what they do well, you know, the 99% chance they're going to beat Duke against them. So, AJ, before I let you go, before we end the show, I got to ask you this. I love asking you this. You've covered a lot of Duke Carolina football games over your career. Any that stand out more than others?
Yeah, the ends of games, a couple of Carolina wins. I think it was Dan Orner, field goal at beat Duke, like a 50-yarder beat Duke about, 18, 19 years ago. When this is back in the day, and thank goodness this era is over, of the blow-up football helmet. Remember those?
Oh, yeah.
Had these big balloon football helmets, and Duke had one over in the corner, which was on the home side, but in the corner of the end zone. And Orner kicks a long field goal, and he runs toward the blow-up helmet, and the team follows him, and they start tearing the thing down.
That's good stuff.
I guess with Tar Heels, you know, Carolina fans like to joke that, well, Duke doesn't really mean that much in football. Well, they win that game, they tear a helmet apart, and then they had the game in 14 when Marquise Williams went nuts on Duke, and they opened up a huge lead. And I think that was the spray paint game, when they got paint all over the locker room. They had that issue.
That one, yeah.
And then, of course, last year with Chaz. I mean, that was exciting. And because it was Chaz who made that play, it made it more exciting. And it was a great atmosphere in Keenan, really one of the best atmospheres I've experienced in Keenan. So those are three. And Duke's won some of the games in the series in recent years, but none really kind of pop out that would make a whole lot of sense to bring up. But those three, especially the Orner one and then the one last year, and they got the bell back last year, too, when they won that. And there were some incidents down in the end zone that kind of made things a little more interesting. I think Josh Graham got a video down there that went crazy on
Twitter. It went viral.
Yeah. So, you know, that's good stuff for us, man. We love when there's a little bit of friction. We love when there's some other things to write about and talk about, because it generates interest and it's fun. We don't go sit and wait for the post-game press conference anymore like we used to because of the era that we're in. But, man, Josh was showing everybody
I'll never forget
with a video on his phone because that was while it was starting to go viral. So that's pretty much it.
Yeah, I remember
and
that.
I hope we have something like that this weekend. I hope we have something fun. I hope it's a good game, regardless of who wins. I hope we have something really fun that we'll talk about 10 years from now.
Yeah,
we need that. It's 2020, man. We need fun.
I was lucky to be on the sidelines for that Duke Carolina game last year. So I was actually I was doing photos for us, but I was right there when Chaz got the interception, and I was by the bell, and I think it was Charlie Heck and I can't remember who the other guy was. I don't remember who the other guy was, but they were the ones when they went and got the bell. They were the kind of the guys that had got there first.
Was it Cater? Was it Alan Cater?
I think it was Cater. I remember Dominic Ross was riding on it.
Yep.
There was a lot of photos of him doing that. And then I remember I got a great photo of Chaz, which I'll plug in the video right about now after the game, of him getting ready for the post-game interview near the student section. And it's just him. You can just tell by his face that he was just kind of awestruck by the moment because of how things happen. So yeah, that one definitely stands out the most for me, and that's a post game that I will never forget. I don't think, no matter how old I get.
You got a lot of photos of Chaz right after the interception.
Yeah, running around like this,
running toward the sideline, and Gilmore's right alongside him. So find some of those and put those up in the video.
I will. I'll definitely.
I guess people already would have seen them by now.
Yeah,
Kevin Roy shot a great post game video. Just letting it all unfold right in front of the camera. We'll try to find that and put that up on the message.
Yeah, I'll try to maybe throw a link in the description on
that was cool stuff.
Video. Yeah, it was awesome.
And they wore the all blues, the navy blues too.
Yep.
I don't know if anybody likes that, but I don't know right now. As the time we're recording, so we don't know what uniforms they're wearing this weekend. But
I'm interested to see if they whip. I highly doubt that we're bringing out the all whites after last weekend. But hey, you never know. We'll see what happens.
Well, they have enough combinations; they could pretty much wear something different every week. And the leadership council votes on it. I guess it's already been determined. So
exactly. So I guess we'll know sooner rather than later. But that's going to do it.
Stormtroopers didn't work last week.
Yeah, I was about to say I don't see them whipping that out again. But hey, man, you never know. We'll see what happens. But that's going to do it for this episode of the THI Football Preview Podcast. Really enjoyed talking to Deana earlier. Always great catching up with Shawn. And a big shout out to him for coming on and talking a little bit about Carolina's opponent this weekend in Duke. As always, guys, if you enjoyed the video, be sure to like it. Be sure to share it. We'll see you guys in the next one. Thanks.
Thanks.